looked at what it means to be forgiven. The second week, it was what it means to experience salvation. Now, one of the questions I got, I thought was a very good question after the second sermon, was okay, I agree this forgiveness is a good thing, forgiveness of self, accepting God's forgiveness. How is it that I go about doing that? In your column this morning, in your bulletin, my column this morning is a response to that. I have it's not 11 sequential steps, it's just 11 things that can help us out. So, if you're dealing with some forgiveness of self, from your past, if you're dealing with not, accepting God's forgiveness, I want to encourage you to take a look at that. Not all 11 steps are going to, hit a home run with you, but I think 2 or 3 of them are, and they're going to be helpful next steps as we live as forgiven people. Last week, Leander talked about relationships, and this morning we're talking about despair. So despair probably is the least attractive of all these. I want to be really clear, what I believe despair is. I think despair is when life's problems have become greater than our resources, and we're surviving and not living. So that's going to look a little bit different for a lot of people, but it's basically when the troubles of the world just become, too much, and we're just hanging on. It's where the hurts that exist in our life is greater than the hope that we see existing in our life. That would be despair as well. Now, I actually want to make a case for despair because despair can actually be a very good thing. So, for example, I was leading a staff meeting for a ministry in Lincoln. I'm guessing there was probably about 13 or 14 of them present, and it was an all-day thing. And what I wanted to hear, and what I wanted them to hear from each other, was really the story of how they got to this place. What was a defining moment in their Christian formation that led them to the place where they're going to be, in ministry full time? What is it that has given them this great big shot in the arm as far as their discipleship goes? Now, what I thought I would hear and what I heard were 2 totally different things. What I thought I would hear was a lot of stories where I went to camp and I just had this incredible experience, and ever since then I've never been the same. Or I was listening to the preacher preach one time, and what he said or what she said, it just rang a bell. And at that moment, I just became a close follower of Jesus. I thought I would hear stuff like that, or I joined a small group, and it was during that season of 3 or 4 months that I just totally committed my life to Christ and decided to follow him. But what everybody said, without exception, was actually a negative event that happened in their life. Somebody talked about, going through a divorce. Somebody talked about going through cancer and becoming a cancer survivor. Somebody talked about alcoholism and how at one time that overcame them, and now they're in recovery. Someone else talked about a battle with a lifelong disease that she'll face. Every single person, time after time, said that it was this negative event, this time of despair, that formed their Christian faith. So Kierkegaard said that faith, it actually sees best in the darkness. Now, if this is you, so my little guy, I have a son, David. He's 9 years old. I don't really talk about him that much, so maybe you're not familiar with him, but I do have a son who's 9, and it's David, and so yesterday was a big day for David. David, it was his best friend's birthday, so they're just going to have the birthday party, and David loves basketball. It's just that's his thing. Eventually he's going to be 5'7", like his dad, or 5'2", like his mom, and the novelty of it's going to wear out. But for now, he's doing great, and he had a big game, and David also came down with the flu yesterday morning. And he wasn't, he didn't want to let his teammates down, and that was that. But the big thing for him is he didn't get to go to his best friend's birthday. So I got this little 9-year-old boy crying and saying, my best friend's birthday. And I mean, my heart broke for him. What I was trying to do is, his dad, well, when you're better, how about me and you and Brandon, we just go do something really fun that you and Brandon pick out. It didn't help. All he could see, and it was despair for him. Now, what's going to happen with him? This morning, his fever was 103.9 degrees, just burning up. We gave him some more medicine, and what's going to happen though is tomorrow, he may have a 100-degree fever. Tuesday it might go back to normal, and Wednesday he'll probably be back in school. Now, I wish that there was a pill or a prayer that I could give to him or say for him that yesterday would have made this go away, but I can't do that. It's not possible. None of us can do it. Now, yesterday, David actually learned some pretty important lessons. He learned that he's not going to be physically capable of always being there for people that he's committed to. Now, here's the deal. Despair can teach us lessons that prosperity cannot. That's just the way it is. If this is you right now, if those hurts are greater than your hopes, if the responsibilities are greater than the resources, if despair is your story right now, I just want you to think that at this time in your life, God is making you stronger. There is something that God is doing in you that prosperity and blessing would not allow to happen. Now, at the same time, I want to say that permanent despair is not God's plan for any of our lives. We're going to go through seasons that are difficult, but we're going to emerge from those seasons and move into seasons of blessing and prosperity. Now, Jesus, he was more than familiar with this. Jesus, we read the story and our heart really breaks, doesn't it? Now, Jesus, he was fully God. Jesus was the Son of God. Jesus is 1/3 of the Trinity. The Father, the Son, that's him, and the Holy Spirit. So Jesus is fully God, but he's also fully human as well. Jesus had a heart that beat. He had skin. He laughed. He cried. He emoted just like any of us. And it was on this last day of his life that Jesus was just hurting. There's absolutely no way that he could not have been hurting. Physically he was hurting. He had just taken the beating of his life. He had taken the beating of anybody's life. He hung on a cross. He knew that his body was shutting down. And then he says those words. Listen to what he says. My God, why have you forsaken me? Now, Jesus was going through relational pain as well. And here, you got to think about this. So if one of you said something to me after church that wasn't very kind or something, I'm probably at the emotional state where I could just deal with that and move on. Now, if I go home and it's Amber, or Benjamin, or David, and they say something, that one's going to sting a little bit more, isn't it? The more we love a person, the more they have the capacity or the propensity to hurt us. So that's what Jesus was doing. He loved all these people. He came to save all these people. He came to die for all these people. He came to give all these people life. And these were the very people that turned their back on him. The Bible says they verbally abused him, they mocked him, they passed by. It was everybody, the crowd, the pastors, the scholars, the soldiers, everybody. Jesus loved them all, and all of us know this truth of life, that the more we love a person, the more they can hurt us. And this was devastating relationally to him. So he says those words, my God, why have you abandoned me? And then there was the emotional stuff that Jesus was going through as well. He had to be experiencing some anxiety. He was about ready to die. He had to be sad. There had to be despair in the life, in the sense that he was saying goodbye to the people that he loved, at least on this side of the grave. He was fully human. Below him was Mary, his mom, Mary, his aunt, and then Mary of Magdalene, his special friend. He knew in a few moments he was going to be with them no longer. The woman that brought him into the world, the other woman who helped raise him, the woman who brought joy to his life. He was having to say goodbye. So emotionally, Jesus says, my God, why have you abandoned me? Now, Benjamin and David, they have a name for me. They're the only two people that call me this name. Can you guys guess what it is? You're close. It's Daddy. We lived in the South at one time, so they call me Daddy. So I'll say, hey, Daddy, can I have some money? Or, hey, Daddy, do you want to play basketball? Now, it's very I always hope they call me this. I love the name. I think it's a great name. And I can't imagine like one of them saying, "Hey Craig, can you make me some macaroni and cheese?" Or, "Hey Father, would you care to play some Uno?" That wouldn't be like symbolic of our relationship. Yet, this is exactly what Jesus did here. So up to this point, and this you have to know the language a little bit. Up to this point, Jesus had always called God Abba, which basically means it means daddy. It's like intimacy between a father and a son. He always called him that every single time, no exception. So when he said, our Father, he says, Daddy, up in heaven, your name is holy. So that's what he always called him, but he did not do that here. For the first time ever, Jesus called God by a different name. In the Aramaic, it's Eli, which is going to be a very formal name for God. He couldn't even call him Daddy. He was so spiritually hurting, he was so alone, he was so distraught that he couldn't say Daddy. He basically said, God, God, why have you left me here all by myself? What have you done to me? What are you doing to me? That was the context of the conversation. Now, these were tough days that Jesus had, and I think that all of us have actually asked that very question before. I don't think we probably quite use those words, but I think we use words that are very similar. I've been a pastor for 22 years. I've heard people say it all the time, like, why is God doing this to me? Why is God letting this happen to me? I think when you've said that phrase, you probably use words like that instead, because the physical pain, it just got to be too much. The emotional pain, it got to be too much. The relational dysfunction, it got to be too much. And we say, God, where is it that you fit in this great big mess that I'm experiencing right now? Now, I want you to know, if you've said this before, and I think many of us have, this does not make you bad. This does not make you unfaithful. This makes you human. Jesus said this very thing. The fully human part of God said this to God himself. God, where is it that you fit in all this mess? I'm alone. I'm hurting. I'm afraid. Where are you? In fact, that's another way we could actually say the question, isn't it? We say, where are you, God? Where are you? I got cancer. Where are you? This person has just left me. Where are you? I can't get over the sadness. Where are you? Now, Jesus, it only got worse for him. He ended up dying. But with Jesus, he knew the end wasn't death. He knew that despair doesn't have the last word. Hope has the last word. He knew that death didn't have the last word. He knew that life has the last word. Jesus was taught this in the temple as a child. He would have read this in the Hebrew scriptures, and we've seen this before many times. I want to tell you about a hospital. It was one of the first people I consistently visited in the hospital. It was in my first church out of seminary when I was in Northwest Iowa. And the woman's name was Curly. She was probably, I'm putting her in her late 80s or early 90s or so. I didn't get to know her terribly well. She was sick by the time I got to the church, and the times I got to know her were just in her house or talking to her at the hospital. So I was in the hospital with her one day, just talking, and the doctor walked in. It was a woman. She was an oncologist, and she looked at Curly, and I think she thought I was the son or the grandson or something. And she looked at us both, and she says, I got some news. It's not good. Your cancer spread. It's all over your body. It's advanced. There's no hope. The doctor, I thought, was very compassionate. She stuck around for a couple minutes. What kind of questions do you ask at that point? She left. So I didn't know what in the world I was going to try to say to, help something like this. And it turned out that I didn't have to say a darn thing, because this woman laying down in this hospital bed looked at me. And I knew her story. She was a Sunday school teacher for 60 years. She led some women's Bible study at the church for decades before I got there. She looked at me and she says, that doctor doesn't know what in the heck she's talking about. Hope isn't a cure. Hope isn't a doctor. Hope is a person. and that person's name is Jesus Christ. Yeah, I got to do her funeral a few months later, and I saw the final healing that happened in her life. Revelation gives us this picture of heaven. It says there is no more pain. God will wipe away all the tears from our eyes. There's a place of no more crying and no more weeping. It's a place of no more despair. Like that, in the end, is our final healing. But I thought about that, and I left the hospital. I kept thinking about that, like, hope is a person. I had never heard that before. In philosophy class, I learned from Nietzsche that hope was actually not a good thing. Nietzsche would say that what hope does is it gives us like this, false security about the future. So we don't do the things that we need to do today to make tomorrow better. So Nietzsche said that hope was worthless. Philosophers would say that hope is a concept. A romantic would say that hope is a dream. But the scriptures and the followers of Jesus, as we look, we realize that hope is a person. It always has been, always will be. I want to take us to the Gospel of Mark, chapter 5. So let's say you have a daughter who's 12 years old. Or you can substitute your 17-year-old son or your 3-year-old son or your 8-year-old twins or whatever. Let's say that this child was sick. The doctors, they just couldn't do a darn thing about it. So what would you do as a parent? You would pretty much do anything that you could do. You would exhaust all the resources that you had to try to give this kid some healing, right? We would do that, and that's what this guy did in Mark chapter 5. So his name was Jairus, and he actually went to Jesus, and he said, Jesus, I got this girl. The doctors have done what they can do. We've prayed for her. We've done everything we can do. Can you heal her? And Jesus is like, yeah, let's go see the girl. So they start to go see the girl, Jesus and Jairus. And wherever Jesus went, there was great big crowds of people. So they were walking down this dirty road. And then all of a sudden, this woman hears that Jesus is like the reason that all these people are crowded around here. Now, the Bible tells us in Mark 5 that this woman has been bleeding for 12 years. For most women, like 4 or 5 days is more than enough, and it's 12 years in this case. Can you imagine that? Like, this is that's despair, right? And she sees Jesus there, and what does she do? She goes up and she gets down and she just basically touches the bottom of Jesus's cloak. Because now for her, hope is a person, and his name is Jesus. Now, Jesus feels this. It's crowded. He tries, who did this? Who touched me? He said. And this woman, it was me. And Jesus looked at her and he said, your faith has made you well. Now, for all of us who are bleeding, whether it's physically or most of us, it's going to be a metaphor. We go to Jesus. We touch his cloak. He is the author and the pioneer and the perfecter of the hope that we have. And he looks at us and he says, your faith will make you well. So the story's not over. Jesus has still got to see this 12-year-old girl. So they make it to the house, and the girl is dead at this time. And the people are like, okay, it's nice you brought the healer here, but it's too late because she's dead. So do you think that's good enough for Jesus? No, it's not. He says, not a problem. We've been through this rodeo a few times before. He tells the 12-year-old girl to get up and walk. And this girl who was once dead is now walking around this room. Now, for any of us that have had dreams that have died, for all of us who have had relationships who have died, Jesus says death is not the end. Hope is the end. Resurrection is the end. It's not over until I say it's over, and I haven't said it's over yet. Healing for us is going to be possible. Now, here, it was an encounter with Jesus. That's what did it, was an encounter with Jesus. So I'm more convinced of this than I am ever before. So my son, Benjamin, I never talk about him either. He's like 14, if you don't know who he is. And he loves this debate stuff. So we were watching the debate the other night. Did anyone see that debate the other night? Some of you have, or no, I'm not watching it. No. I'm thinking and I know it doesn't politics aside here, like I don't care what you believe, you don't care what I believe, and let's just put that part aside. I'm thinking like, okay, we got these 5 guys up here and there's 2 on the other side, and I'm thinking, okay, of the 320 million people in the country, is this like the best we can do? And then now if you really have this like attachment to one of the candidates, I apologize to you, but I was thinking like, it doesn't matter. Like, our hope is in a person, but the name is not Trump or Cruz or Clinton. The name is Jesus. That's where our hope lies. You know, for all of us who have had dreams die, for all of us who have been injured, for all of us who have had loved ones who have experienced death, hope is a person, and his name is Jesus. He gives us life in this world, abundance. You know, if you're going through that really tough time of despair right now, there is hope. One of the things I always tell people that are going through like really, really tough times, if you come to my office, I've probably shared this metaphor with you before. I'll say, you know, where you're at right now is you're in the middle of a hurricane. That's where you're at. You know, the only thing that you can feel is the wind and the rain that is coming down 100 miles an hour. The only thing that you can see when you look up are the dark clouds of the storm. You know, and it's during these times, like for the people of Israel, that hurricane lasted 40 years. They were in the wilderness for 40 years because they weren't ready to go into the promised land because God had to do something in them and through them. You know, so if this despair is part of your life right now, just ask yourself the question, God, do something in me, do something through me, prepare me, you know, for these days of blessings and prosperity. And then, you know, for those of us that are feeling pretty good, right? I mean, you have to know that despair is coming. It just is. Like, you're a human being, and it's impossible not to experience physical, relational, or some type of emotional despair in life. But Jesus says, I'm with you. You know, have faith. You know, if you're dead, I can raise you up both here in this world and forever in the world to come. So let us go to God and let us pray.